Hello, my name is Gabby and welcome back to my channel, or if you're new here, then welcome to my channel. And today's video is going to be my favorite reads from 2021. I also do have a 2021 reading journal flip through that I will leave in a card up around the top of the screen. And then I will also have playlists for like journal with me's and spoiler-free reviews down in the description below, because I ended up reviewing a lot of these books this year. And then there are also going to be other books in this video that I don't think I've talked about on this channel yet, so this should be a fun one. So I didn't end up putting up this video last year because I had it all ready to go and the film, and then as soon as I got it done, my laptop crashed and I lost all of it. But my top 3 books from 2021 were Children of Blood and Bone, and then I guess also the sequel kind of counts, even though I kind of don't want it to because I didn't like it as much, but I usually count like books from the same series together as one entry on a list when I've like read them in the same year, even though I didn't really read these two that close together. But Children of Blood and Bone, Tomi Adeyemi, that was number 3. Number 2 was Girl Made of Stars by Ashley Herring Blake, and my book of the year for 2020 was Felix Ever After by Kacen Callender. As for this year, I read about half as many books as I usually do, but there were some really strong ones in that group, despite like my reading slumps being stronger and more frequent than they really have ever been. And that is especially the case for the top 3 of this video. But first, I do just want to go over like some general list guidelines. So in order to make like my top 10, they have to be 5 stars, which in the case of this year, I really only had 10 books that qualified to make the list, so that was an easy one. So with that being the case, my honorable mentions this year are just like a top 5 of my 4-star reads. I also excluded all the manga that I read this year because that would just be like too much to try to rank like individual volumes or just like series, and it overwhelms me to even think about it, so it's just gonna sit out this video. But graphic novels are included in this list because in order to make a top 10 I had to include one, but that'll be in there later. But yeah, those are the guidelines. I think there are some really amazing books in this video, so let's just get into talking about them. Also, as a general reminder, a lot of the books on this list come with heavy content warnings. They like vary in like recommended age recommendations as well. So if you're thinking about reading any of these and you think you might have any concerns, please check out the content warnings for these books. I will leave them in the description of this video, or I will leave the ones that I find in the description of this video. So we're gonna start off with the honorable mentions, and like I said, this is just basically a top 5 of my 4-star reads. So number 5 is I Want to Be Where You Are by Kristina Forrest. So this follows a ballerina who wants to audition for like a high-profile dance school, but she's forbidden by her mother from doing so, but then she decides to travel there on her own behind her mother's back. But she is also stuck doing so with her annoying next-door neighbor. So this was just basically really cute. I pretty much read it in one sitting, and overall it's just one that gave me really everything that I wanted and expected from it, which I was not expecting a 5-star read from this, but I was expecting a 4. It gave me that, and it made me very happy, so it's number 5. At number 4, we have Elatsoe by Darcie Little Badger. This takes place in a version of America that has been shaped by the monster's magic and knowledge of its people, both indigenous and not. We follow our main character after her cousin is murdered in a seemingly picture-perfect town, and we follow her as she tries to uncover the dark and twisted secrets of this town while also trying to protect those that she cares for. So I don't usually love mysteries. I've had a really hard time trying to find a mystery to enjoy, and this one really worked for me. The story felt kind of nostalgic for me for some reason, and I really liked our main character, and also just the world itself I found to be really interesting. It ended up with the 4-star instead of the 5 because I did fall into a reading slump in the middle that brought down my enjoyment, but this was also just a really great time to read when I wasn't feeling like that. So at number 3, we have The City of Brass by S.A. Chakraborty. So this follows our main character who accidentally summons a djinn during her con, and this forces her to come to terms with the fact that magic is actually real despite her not wanting to believe in it beforehand. This took me absolutely forever to read, and just not like to start it, but to just get through it. but I got really sucked into this world and invested in the characters, and this is like a level of investment that I have not felt to this extent in a while. I just feel so invested in the characters and the actual story and just really everything about this, and I just love getting lost in this world. But yeah, I definitely really appreciate this one. I'm still working my way through the sequel. Once again, it's taking me a long time just to physically read, but I am definitely loving it. At number 2, we have In Deeper Waters by F.T. Lukens. This is a high fantasy that follows a prince who must rely on a stranger after he is kidnapped during his coming-of-age tour. So this was just a really cute read, and it left me wanting so much more from this universe and these characters, even though this is just a standalone, I'm pretty sure. It tugged at like my feelings and my heart in such an amazing way, in both like really positive and this is really wholesome type ways, and then also I hope everything's okay because this is getting a little bit dark type of ways. I'm just really glad that I read this, and I am incredibly fond of this story. So my final honorable mention and my number 1 4-star read of 2021 was Ironheart by Nina Varela. Speaking of things that tugged at my heart, this is the sequel to Crier's War. Crier's War follows this world that has been taken over by the Autome. We follow a human named Isla who is a servant that dreams of vengeance for her family by killing the Sovereign's daughter Crier, and then we also follow Crier who is an Autome, and she is realizing for the first time that the people that she is close to may not be as nice as she once thought. I think this is one of the only, if not the only, series that I finished in 2021. But I just really loved both of our main characters, especially Crier, but it was also in this book that made me like really connect to Isla and start loving her like equally to Crier. Also, this duology does feature a sapphic romance, which was amazing. The story in this one did take a turn that I didn't expect, but I ended up having like a great time with it. I think I also underestimated just how much fun I had with this book because like there's a lot of dark stuff going on, so I don't really consider this to be a fun duology, especially the way Crier's War tugged at my heart, but for some reason this one, we just had a great time together. I also just really love and gelled with the writing style, so yeah, this was a really great time for me overall. But yeah, this is my number 1 4-star read of 2021, and let's go get into the actual list now. So at number 10, we have The Black Kids by Kristina Hammonds Reed. So this book takes place in 1992, and it follows our main character as she navigates her life after Rodney King is beaten by 4 police officers. I'm pretty sure that this is a debut for this author, and I just fell in love, like absolutely in love with the writing style for this book. It's one of those writing styles that makes me wish that I was more into annotating, because I remember thinking like about so many lines that I just wanted to highlight or like underline or put a sticky note on. I don't know, I don't annotate much. As for our main character, she's a really complicated person. This story does have like its coming of age tone to it. I guess you would call it that, I don't know. And even though I didn't really like her all of the time, I still cared for her and just wanted her to be okay and happy. As for the story itself, I would say I remember it being very character based on her, but there are also many themes and conversation points that, even though this book takes place in the past, are still very much relevant to today. And overall, I will be definitely looking out for more books by this author in the future because just something about this writing style really grabbed me and I want more. So at number 9, we have Rule of Wolves by Leigh Bardugo. So I guess Ironheart isn't the only series that I technically finished, even though this is just like, what is this, book 7 out of the entire Grishamverse that's still ongoing, so it still kind of counts. Ironheart is still kind of the only series. Rule of Wolves is a sequel to King of Scars, and like I said, it's book 7 in the Grishamverse. And reading this just invested me right back into the series. And it did kind of remind me of what I loved and enjoyed about this universe in the first place, and also just reminded me about how much that I truly do love some of these characters. And that is especially the case for Zoya and Nikolai, who became some of my absolute favorite characters in this entire universe. And I just love following them and their story. And same thing with Nina, who has always had like a special place in my heart since Six of Crows. But it was really nice to see her again in this one. There were a lot of scenes that like had me on the edge of my seat waiting to see what was going to happen. I was really addicted to this, which is good because it's a long one. And then there were also just a lot of cute and fun scenes as well, and I'm just really interested to see where Leigh Bardugo takes this series in the future. And speaking of books that I got super invested in, at number 8 we have The Black Flamingo by Deonn Atta. This is one that is written in verse and follows the life of a boy who is exploring and coming to terms with his identity. This was so hard for me to put down, and once again I basically read this in one sitting, which isn't really hard for me with a book that's written in verse. But also I think this one was a little bit special in that sense. And then other than addicting, it's also just a really powerful story about our main character exploring his sexuality, his family, his race, his gender, etc. Besides just following our main character, I also really enjoyed a lot of the poems in here, and the epilogue has a very special place in my heart, and that really grabbed me specifically. But this whole thing worked for me all around. At number 7, we have another book that is written in verse, and that is Clap When You Land by Elizabeth Acevedo. So this book follows our two main characters after they find out that their father died in a plane crash. These two, we follow like a split perspective. They don't have any idea that the other one exists, but his death does make them aware of each other. So if Elizabeth Acevedo wasn't just one of my absolute favorite authors before reading this book, this one definitely solidified that. I've also enjoyed every book that I've ever read from this author, but this one just may be my favorite, and by that I mean it definitely is. And it also just reminded me of how much I love when Elizabeth Acevedo writes in verse. The Poet X was the first book that I read, and then I read With the Fire on High, which wasn't written in verse, so coming back to this was a great reminder of that. The family dynamics were so complex and interesting, and then there were heart-wrenching and also heartwarming scenes in here as well. This book also just has this atmosphere that's really hard to describe. It's a sad book, but it really does have like this captivating and beautiful atmosphere to it, or at least it created that for me, and yeah, I just have zero complaints with this one. At number 6, we have Legendborn by Tracy Deonn. Legendborn follows our main character Bree Matthews after the death of her mother. Bree was accepted into a residential program at UNC, and this seems like a good escape from everything that is going on in her life. That is up until she witnesses an attack by a magical creature during her first night on campus. The attack introduces her to a secret society who call themselves Legendborn, and these are individuals that hunt down creatures, and it also introduces her to a powerful mage who calls himself Merlin. This mage attempts to wipe Bree's memory of what she saw that night, however his failure to successfully do so unlocks Bree's own magic and hidden memory of the night her mother died. Bree then has to decide how far she is willing to go to get the truth. I just feel like this is such a well-constructed book and story. Like, this gave me the feeling that I was reading a YA classic, and what I mean by that is like it gave me a feeling that I haven't had since my first year after I started watching BookTube and I went and read all of the YA classics. And it just made me excited to read again. The characters and the relationships were interesting, and I really enjoyed how the Arthurian legends were incorporated into this. This is also a book that's hard for me to specifically point out what I loved about it, because I think what I love most about it is how everything came together into this and as a whole. But yeah, I'm just so ready for the sequel to this, but I'm pretty sure it's still like a little while before that comes out. But I will be ready for it whenever it comes. So number 5 is Heartstopper Volume 1 by Alice Oseman. I feel a little bit bad about having a graphic novel all the way up here at 5. I wasn't really even going to include it on this list until I realized I only had 9 5-stars instead of 10. So I added this as a 10th, and then I actually like considered it with everything else, and it ended up this high. But Heartstopper follows our main character Charlie, who is an openly gay high schooler. He's kind of like the high-strung overthinking type, and then this also follows our other main character Nick, who's like a cheerful and soft-hearted rugby player. These two become friends fairly quickly, and Charlie is falling hard but isn't sure if there's a chance there. I have heard for I feel like forever just how good this was, but I really wasn't expecting it to grab my heart the way that it did. There are just so many good moments in here that just really impacted me in a way that surprised me for a graphic novel, which maybe I'm underestimating graphic novels in that sense, but also I don't have that many 5 stars for graphic novels, so this is a special occasion for me. I just quickly grew so attached to these characters and their relationship and their story, and it played with my heart so much in so many good ways, even though it wasn't always good, but like that's what I signed up for too. I haven't read volume 2 yet, even though I really wanted to. I've been holding off because I don't have the other volumes yet, and like like I don't want to read volume 2 and run out before I'm caught up. I may just definitely have to go for it soon though, because I really want to keep following these characters and their stories so bad. So at number 4, we have The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue by V.E. Schwab. This book follows our main character who makes a bargain one night in France in 1714 in order to obtain her freedom. This bargain makes her immortal, however she is also now cursed to be forgotten by everyone who she ever comes in contact with. And this book basically just follows her adventures and life as it extends through many different continents and centuries. Her life continues like this until one day she comes across a man in a bookstore who is the first person to remember her in nearly 300 years. I can't stop looking at it. That sticker really got me, man. Alright. I got so invested in this story, which is pretty typical for me in a V.E. Schwab book. But I just love the concept of this one so much, and it was so nice to just get lost in like this slow and character-based book. The characters were so easy to root for, and like with Legendborn, I just love mostly how everything came together. I just feel like it's a very well executed book. I also really love the atmosphere to this one as well. So yeah, the hype around this one was very much a lot, and it definitely made me nervous for a second, but it really did pay off with this one for me. So we've reached the top 3, and I have just been so torn about these next 2. Like, I feel like my number 1 for this year was obvious and very clear to me, but these next 2, like numbers 2 and 3, are so close, and I have no idea how to differentiate between my love for both of them. And I don't really know how I'm supposed to rank one above the other, but I did. I don't feel good about my ranking, and I probably never will because it's never going to feel correct. But yeah, we're gonna get into it. At number 3, we have Black Sun by Rebecca Roanhorse. This is book 1 of the Between Earth and Sky trilogy. I forgot the name of that. It's inspired by the civilizations of the pre-Columbian Americas and takes place in a city called Tova around the time of the winter solstice. This is usually a time for celebration and renewal. However, this year it takes place around the same time as a solar eclipse, which according to the Sun Priest signifies an unbalancing of the world. At the same time, a ship begins its adventure towards Tova, and it's carrying a seemingly harmless passenger, but the captain has her suspicions of him. This is a really hard book for me to give a synopsis of. I got so sucked into and invested in this story. There are some really interesting characters and character dynamics, and I just loved exploring everything that this book had to offer, from the characters to the world itself. I never wanted to put this down, and I was constantly excited to pick it up and read it. And besides my number 1 pick for this year, this is the only other book in this video that I can say that for. Something about this felt so fresh for me, and it provided me with a level of investment that is really only rivaled by The City of Brass. And overall, I'm just so ready for the sequel, and I think this one's less of a wait, which is really great because I need it. So that brings us to my number 2 pick, and number 2 is Raybearer by Jordan Ifueko. So this is a West African fantasy that follows our main character, Tracy. She has been raised in isolation by her mother, who was often absent from her childhood. When she reaches the right age, her mother sends her off to the capital to compete with other children for a spot on the Crown Prince's Council. Each council member gets connected to the others through the Ray, which creates a very deep emotional bond between them. This is a closeness that our main character craves. However, her mother made a wish for her to kill the Crown Prince, and she is being compelled to obey this. So I just did a reading vlog for this book, so this is very fresh in my mind still. At the end of the day, I think my attachments to these characters were just stronger than my attachments to the characters in Black Sun. Like, I feel like that's the only thing that I was missing from Black Sun, was just like a really good attachment to the characters. This was also just a really satisfying read, and I loved our main characters so much, and there are so many amazing themes that were touched on in here, and also just interesting and engaging plot lines. Like, some of the most engaging plot lines that I've read this year that like made me excited to keep reading, and also just made me want to know like everything about everything in here. This is another one that I need to get my hands on the sequel to, because it's already out. And I'm just really excited to see where the story goes, because I feel like I know where it's going based on where this one left off, and I'm really interested in it. And yeah, I'm just looking forward to continuing with these characters for as long as this series goes. And with that, we are now at my number one pick. My favorite book that I read in 2021 is Cemetery Boys by Aiden Thomas. This is a known voices book that follows our main character Yadriel, who wants to prove that he is a real brujo to his family who has problems accepting his gender. Due to this, he and his cousin perform the needed ritual themselves as they set out to free the ghost of his cousin who was recently murdered. However, instead of his cousin, he accidentally summons the ghost of his high school's bad boy, Julian. Left with little choice, our main character agrees to help Julian find out what happened to him. However, the more time that they spend together, the less that he wants Julian to leave. So out of my top 3 books, I read them all towards the end of the year, and honestly at that point I wasn't expecting really anything to really grab me the way that these 3 have. And this was the first one to do it out of them, which is one of the many reasons I am grateful for this book's very existence. I never wanted to put this down while I was reading it, and not only that, but I wanted to reread it once I got done, and that is not something I say too often. The characters had such amazing voices that I gelled with so easily, and I loved the dynamics and chemistry between all 3 of our main characters here. Even though this certainly does have its darker and more infuriating moments from certain characters, there were a lot of really fun moments and comedic moments, and it was just making me smile a lot. I also love the atmosphere, which ended up feeling like the exact type of atmosphere that I'm always looking for from like the books I read in the fall, but just like always and in general, I love this atmosphere. I enjoyed the romance elements of this. I thought that they were really well done. It reminded me kind of like classic YA at certain points, but even that, usually I wouldn't like too much, but in this one I just thought it was fun. So yeah, overall this is definitely a new favorite of just all time. It gave me everything I wanted and also more. I just loved it so much. I kind of want to reread it right now, but I won't because I have too many other things to read. I knew going into this that I was going to love it, but I just was not prepared for how much. So yeah, it's definitely my favorite book that I read in 2021. Okay, so that is all I have for this video. Thank you all so much for watching. Like, comment, subscribe, hit the bell, and answer the question that'll be around here if you want to do that. And hopefully I will see you here next time. Bye!